Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, are we beyond the era of a football team investing in just one quarterback to rule them all? Some regular season observations from Chris Level may indicate so. We'll get into that. Also, a big roster domino to fall as one name we mentioned earlier in the week, Tech offensive lineman Weston Wright, makes his intentions clear for next year. We'll dive into it and what it means for those other 300-pound dominoes within Texas Tech's offensive line group moving forward. All of that and a final bowl update as we head into the weekend. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be back with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Appreciate always being your first listen with new episodes each weekday on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline's got you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Chris, you and I had a conversation earlier this week. Is it related to a Texas Tech football offseason eligibility radar of sorts? And we're going to continue to get some clarification, obviously, as we roll through these weeks heading towards the bowl game and then clearly into the offseason. But we did get a little clarification on one of those names you mentioned that I thought was one of the more interesting names to mention because it impacts arguably the most important positional group or one of two most important positional groups on a football team, this being the offensive line. And the name is Weston Wright, who indicates that he will forego that additional year of eligibility and seek professional opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that he because here's all the dynamics in play with like a guy like Weston Wright. He was a solid player here and a very durable and available player here. And, I think at some point you almost just kind of say, hey, I'm ready to go to the next phase of my life. The flip side too is that there's no guarantee if he stays at guard that he's the starter next year. Now, what do I mean by that? I think that if Cole Spencer, who by all accounts they felt like was the best available offensive lineman that they would have had when everybody was healthy, and he's a guard, and I think they have every intention to move Dennis Wilburn from center to guard because they feel like he is a much better fit at guard, and he was your best offensive lineman.
That's really interesting, by the way, Chris, because I think I get what the logic could be there, but that does mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you got to go out and get a new guy to play that position, right? And that was
or what if you spend the next month of bowl practices and you give Caleb Rogers a shot at center?
Ooh.
Because that's what I think that may be what they indeed look at.
A shot. I think that's an important word.
Yeah, and part of that is because I think that was something that, look, we've had Coach Hamby was on Coach McGuire's show, and that was part of the conversation. Is that the month of December we're maybe going to mix it up. We've got 15 practices, may do some different things and see what some different things look like. And he kind of hinted at putting somebody else at center, maybe one of the tackles. And I think he's referring to Caleb Rogers. I think we would agree that Caleb Rogers wasn't necessarily your best offensive lineman. He struggled at times. Okay.
You're being very generous this holiday season, Chris.
But I think, Caleb is very energetic, and I think they want to give him a shot there. And yeah, you don't want to rule out maybe trying to bring in a center from the portal and things like that, because now that Weston has opted to not be back. I think there's now a spot that you could go use from the portal. I think that you also have to wonder, are guys like Cade Briggs and Michael Shanahan, who were portal guys last year, are they going to stay here? Because it's pretty evident that they're not going to play or factor in. And I think they've both graduated. And so if they do want to play, I think, maybe you try to help them find somewhere else to go or whatever the case may be.
Was a center, right? Or was he projected there?
Yeah. And his problem, Casey, was that he had I think it was like a wrist or a thumb or something. And he missed most of the offseason, including most of August. And so he never really got a shot. And then I think when he was finally healthy, I just don't think that the snaps were as good. And he had a hard time holding up strength-wise on the interior there. And so that's why Dennis was kind of moved, permanently to center. And he played center all spring because of the injury to Briggs. And so that's kind of how we ended up here. It just goes back to that is a position group that you're looking to upgrade, and everybody knew that it was a group that needs to be better. You're trying to move the pieces around a bit to try to maximize that group because, and I think as you look at it, even though Weston Wright may depart, and again, he's going to play in the bowl game, so he's going to play one more game. So don't, because that was the first thing I thought. I was like, he's declaring. Is he still going to finish out and play one more game? The answer is yes. But you've now, if you have Wilburn and Cole Spencer, and like you've still got Jacoby Jackson, you've still got Landon Peterson. You feel really good about your guards. Okay, plural. You've got some starters, some depth, some experience now, and I think that Ty Buchanan and Monroe Mills. With the arrow is pointing up at them as far as tackles go, but wouldn't rule out trying to bring in. In other words, if you go to the portal offensive line wise, it's going to be either a tackle or a center. One of those. You don't need to go replace Weston Wright and try to go find another guard. I think you've got that. It's a somebody that could start at center for you, or possibly start at tackle for you, or provide some depth at tackle or whatever, as they try to work through and try to figure out if somebody like Caleb can play center or, what else. But it's just about trying to find the best five you've got, put them in the right spot, and turn them loose. And so there's a lot going on there that we get into by the Weston Wright departure. But as you look off into the distance, this month of December is kind of what they'll start messing with some of that, I think. And I'm not telling you that's what it's going to look like whenever they play in the bowl game, that they would move. But if they practice it and kind of like it, certain things, that may be in fact what you get in the bowl game. Some guys in different spots that we hadn't seen all year. Yeah, but
I don't even know how I would process that, but I guess might tell you a little bit about, I don't know, how they view the bowl game or view this time of year, or.
Well, and it's all about who's healthy too, because I don't think you will put your best foot forward to try to win the bowl game. Make no mistake about that. And if they don't really like what they've got, I think you leave it as is. But I'm going to be shocked if they don't practice some of this in December, because that's kind of what this stuff's about. You've earned the right to kind of fiddle with some of this stuff and get a jump start on the spring. And get a look ahead at next year and see kind of what it looks like. And that's the fun part about those 15 practices. If you want to use them all, is that you can do some of that.
Man, I guess personally speaking, I'm just really rooting for Mills and Buchanan to find some way to be bookends. I don't know, on either side or wherever they can fit in, because it seems like the logistics of going out and getting a reliable tackle as opposed to possibly shopping for a center maybe a little bit more difficult. I don't know, Chris, now that I say that, am I wrong? Because obviously the center is the guy that kind of needs to be a quarterback of sorts for that group. Which one is more difficult to go find on the market?
Probably a tackle, just because, I mean, there's just fewer good ones out there. Not that centers are easy to find by any means, especially one that can play and play well in this league. But tackles are just, hard to find. That's why they get paid so much money in the NFL. Sure. I mean, like, look at it from an NFL draft standpoint. centers are like the best center is like a third, fourth round pick at times. The best tackles are top picks in the draft.
Right.
So I think that equates to trying to find the guys at the lower level too in college. But so we'll see, kind of what. There's a lot going on with that position group, I guess is my point. So there's going to be some more departures, I would guess, just because I just don't think there's any guarantees that, like, Ethan Card, another name, didn't really play a whole lot. I think he can come back. I don't know if you're looking to push him to come back or not. I mean, those are internal conversations that Coach Hamby and Coach Kitley and Coach McGuire will have with a lot of these guys, because if they want to play, probably not going to happen here. And then now what? Now how do we proceed when we have that answer and all those things?
I'm sorry if I missed it, but did you mention Jacoby Jackson
Yes.
in this mix? I think we've talked about him before. He is an interior guy, right?
Yeah, he definitely is. And I think, him and Landon Peterson is who really manned that right guard spot almost all season. But like I said, if Cole Spencer and Dennis Wilburn are in fact – and if you can't go find a center that you really like, I mean, you've got Dennis that still can play there. I think the thought is he's would be a much better guard than he is a center. And so, but again, he's got some Swiss Army knife to him, and that you can kind of put him wherever is best and use him as such. But it gives you options. It gives Coach Hamby options. It gives you depth now. But you've got, those two guys at right guard that have got plenty of game experience. They've started games. They've played in plenty of games. And it just makes that group better, because now if somebody gets dinged up or you have to move some pieces around, you're not bringing in somebody that's never done it before, So, anyway, that's just kind of in a nutshell, the snowball effect by looking at it by a guy like Weston Wright leaving and going to not opt to come back next year.
Well, we talked about it earlier in the week, and would encourage anybody that's interested in the comings and goings as far as bonus eligibility, transfer portal, et cetera, to check out our episode earlier in the week. And you touched on the offensive line situation in general. It's a high impact position, in my opinion, as high impact as it gets, paired along with the defensive front. And you're under a lot of pressure to really be better there, because I think a lot of us would imagine what you could have been as a team if you were a little more consistent there. And I know some of that out of your control as you were impacted by injuries and things like that. But that is one of those spots, obviously, that's going to be a priority coming up this offseason. So curious to see what some of the moves are going to look like. And as Chris alludes to there, maybe curious to see what could occur over the next month or so, a little less than that, as you get ready for a bowl game and what that may look like when you finally get to that matchup. We'll stick with the Red Raiders coming up ahead. Want to touch on some of those who heard their names called this week from the conference office, as we saw some all-conference lists released, and maybe one of those who didn't hear his name called in a certain spot that I feel like is outrageous, erroneous, capricious, and arbitrary. Now I'm just saying words that I think Jackie Childs would say. Not sure if that is applicable, but we'll investigate. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. They got you covered once again heading into the weekend as you're getting razor sharp for conference championship weekend, bowl season on the horizon. Are you slicing and dicing in the college basketball world just yet? If you are and you want to sharpen up further, check out our friends at BetOnline. It is the headquarters for live betting stats and scores, all the angles, all the action, and all the angles on the action throughout the year. Whether it's football, basketball, combat sports, esports, which is not a made-up word. They tell me this is something that people out there will know what I'm talking about, even though I don't. They've got it covered for you there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite events. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about what the trends are shaping up to look like this weekend with BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts if you have not so far. Thanks to those of you who have saddled up for the ride already and are making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen each day. And we hope that you'll make Locked On Sports Today, your second listen where you're going to find instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day on Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Talking Texas Tech football and some post-regular season accolades beginning to roll in. And Chris, some not really going to catch you off guard when you're seeing things fall at the feet of Tyree Wilson, whether it's All-American, I think honorable mentions so far, all-conference list as a first-teamer. See some other guys, second-team honorable mention as far as the conference is concerned. Was curious what stood out to you. I know we're going to talk Tyree Wilson more so, but anything else jump out to you off of those lists?
Well, I think that you get a good feel for we've talked about this some as the season has gone along, but you get a good feel of what your team wasn't or what it didn't have, and that was just really, other than Tyree, can you really make a case for anybody to be like first team all league and things like that? And that's not to take away from your team, because I think your team is really solid across the board. There just wasn't the quote unquote draft picks sitting there on either side of the ball that, and you kind of knew this coming into the season because you didn't see a lot of Red Raiders on the preseason team. And I wonder if some of that on the postseason has to do with what it looked like in the preseason. It shouldn't have anything to do with that, but I just wonder if that's kind of how some of that stuff goes. I'll make that point even further when we start talking about Tyree, but so I'm just looking around for Tech guys, and Malik Dunlap gets his name called. I wondered if Trey Wolf may have a chance, and somebody like that, but there's really nobody else that, maybe Krishawn Merriweather, but there's some good linebackers in this league as well, but maybe in Muddy Waters, but as I glance over it, there's just not a lot of Tech love there, but I kind of understand it at some level too.
Yeah, Tyree Wilson, first team, Malik Dunlap, second team, all Big 12 defensively. I thought Merriweather deserved consideration maybe for a second team mention. He was an honorable mention guy. But as you allude to there's some stiff competition at that position within the Big 12 conference. Otherwise, you saw guys like Hutchings, Bradford, Muddy Waters, Rayshad Williams, Joseph Adidere, an all Big 12 honorable mention guy. And I think that was, I don't want to say exclusively like second half of the season work that he was doing. But as the season went on, Chris, I really felt like when you got into the stretch run of the schedule, I was noticing him a lot more. And that's a name I think coming into the year, maybe I'm a little surprised to see on any of these lists when it's all said and done. So good for him.
Well, it's fun to think that he's just a pup, you know, and he's got it all in front of him. And, he's going to get pressed into major duty if you don't see Jalen or Tony come back. But if he's got a chance to still play with those guys and be a part of a rotation where he's kind of gets to continue to grow and learn and emerge as a college football player, it would only be better for him. But it's fun to know that guy's just a freshman and he played so much football because he's only going to be better for it.
I know that this is weighted by what you did in conference. So that's probably going to knock Donovan Smith, obviously. But I thought it was interesting. You had three quarterbacks start 4 games. Baron Morton is the guy that gets the mention there as an honorable mention guy on the offensive side.
Yeah, and it's other coaches that are voting on this, or supposedly other coaches. Maybe it's somebody else's GA or – who the heck is actually making the votes here. But I'd be willing to bet that, between TCU and Oklahoma State, and so there were some of those games where, they really saw how talented he is and all that. Not that people didn't see that with Donovan, but I think that, maybe coaches saw what everybody sees around here, that he's clearly the future. But and in some ways, you kind of split votes right there, because if you can only vote for one guy or whatever, then, right, you got to pick between the two. So, but yeah, I mean, again, and another freshman, that hopefully has it still all in front of him.
Well, and I don't want to get too bogged down in the honorable mention list. I mean, it is what it is, but I was just kind of surprised to see who was bubbling up in the eyes of others, maybe compared to what we've seen here. And the offensive linemen that get mentions are Peterson and Dennis the Menace Wilburn. So I just thought that was kind of interesting too, to see them included among those guys up front.
And we've known this about Dennis. I think it's nice. Yeah. Landon Peterson got some, and again, He's been missing the latter part of the season, out for the year, not going to play in the bowl game, and all that. But that's the part that we talked about some, but I just don't know if enough people realized, whenever Mills was out and Peterson was out, you're really flawed up front, or trying the best you can to keep it afloat. And you didn't have that many bullets to fire as it was. And, but yeah, nice to see Landon, because I think he's I think a sophomore, so he's still got plenty of years left to play here, and we've already clearly established what we think of Dennis. Man, he thank God for that dude. I mean, because I think he saved your bacon all season long.
No question about it, man. And just an awesome story. I'm glad to still be riding with him.
He's the best kid too, man. He's the best kid too. Smile.
You would have to assume, just because of the story, man. I don't know his background. I know his sports background. I don't know his personal background, but who does what he did?
Exactly. I mean, just yeah. I'm 3 thumbs up on that kid, man.
Is that your big toe? Well, I don't even want to guess. Tyree Wilson, defensive player of the year, co-defensive player of the year. I think he's got to be on these short lists. Were you surprised to not see him actually get a mention there?
Yeah, I was. I think statistically, he's better. I think he's a better player. We're obviously a bit biased in this space. I think part of the preseason list, because it's Felix Anduke Amoza, I think is how you say his last name. Sorry if I've screwed that up. The Kansas State kid, yeah. He was the preseason defensive player of the year. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I think that does carry some weight. He did not have a bad year by any means. He was actually really good. I just don't think he was as good as Tyree Wilson. The other thing that Tyree Wilson has working against him is he didn't play the final 2 games, and you ended up winning both of those and all that, as you look at this. But, hey, man, Wilson's going to go make a ton of money. He's going to get picked really high. And so it's really just left for conversations just like this. The NFL folks know what he's about, what he's capable of. The other guy that I wouldn't have been surprised to see get some mentions for Defensive Player of the Year was Jalen Ford at Texas, because he was their best player, and I think he made some very impactful plays to help them win games or to seal games, things like that. And so, again, are you splitting votes? Is it, does that hurt a guy like Tyree's case, that there may be more than one other option, and so it splits it and it hurts all those guys, and so they just end up going with the one that was the preseason guy? I don't know. I'm playing these hypotheticals. I'm not real sure, but anyway. But yeah, I was hopeful that he would got the nod there, but he didn't.
Defensively heavy for Texas Tech as far as any of these mentions, and probably not all that much of a surprise. But I think some Tech fans may be surprised if you just ask them, okay, besides Tyree Wilson, who do you think your second best defensive player is? And I know there are all kinds of metrics by which you could define what I just said, but Malik Dunlap is your second team mentioned. I don't know that that'd be the second name on everybody's list.
And I think maybe that's about what the other group of corners in the Big 12 look like, as much as it is where does he rank on your defensive team? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I got you.
It'd be because I think you and I would both agree that Krishan Merriweather was that we could make a case for Kosa Eldridge. I could certainly make a case for Muddy Waters. I mean, and there's some other guys that I think were more important to what you were doing. But I do go back to, now this was a non-conference game, but I go back to like the game that Malik Dunlap had in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was against his former team and all that. He was superb. He was really, really good. And so, anyway, I don't know if that's how that goes or not, but I have a feeling that conversation is more about the other group of corners in the league as opposed to what your team looks like per se.
Yeah, that makes sense. Congratulations to those guys that got a mention on whatever list across the conference. Your specialists and Wolf and McNamara were all Big 12 honorable mention as well. So something for us to chew on, and as you said, will not affect the dollars there to be made for guys like Tyree Wilson one way or another. But I'll complain about it a little bit because we can. Coming up next, let's get back to these 12 games. Regular season in review, and we'll get to the whiteboard, chalkboard. Not sure if you're a dust or marker kind of man there, Chris, but 3 things that are standing out to Chris level we'll discuss next on Locked On Texas Tech. It's Locked On Texas Tech for your ear hole. Or those eyes, I suppose. Just an old radio guy. Got to update the cliches. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for joining us once again with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Before we are out of here today, still digesting what we saw this season in Lubbock and beyond as the Red Raiders went 7-5. And that obviously a mark, I think, above most of the projections. 5-7, 6-6. I think were probably the most popular projections heading into the season. Chris, you and I talked earlier this week about the improbability of some of these wins, including most recently against the Oklahoma Sooners. And I know as you've continued to look back on this season and gauge year one, which is kind of something I have to remind myself of, year one for Joey McGuire, things continue to pop out to you. I think some of them kind of still in that improbable realm.
Yeah, so there's we'll go through kind of a list of one point that I just want to make, and then a couple of other things that I just think it goes back to the improbability of kind of what your issues were, and man, if some of this was fixed or better, you would maybe be staring at a much better season than what you just had, and I think we all feel pretty good about the season that you just had, considering everything that went on. The first one is you finish up the regular season at a -8 in your turnover margin. -8. That is 117th in the country. Okay?
Yikes.
You threw 16 interceptions this year. 16 of them. And all 3 quarterbacks shared that, not necessarily equally, but they're all 3, have some of those. And if again, it goes back to you didn't create enough takeaways, and you certainly gave it away way too much. However, you're 7-5. I mean, because again, if you would have told me before the season, what's one of the most important stat categories that if I can, wish this, it's turnover margin being a plus or hovering around 0, because boy, you do like your chances at that point. Because in any close game, that's sometimes a difference, and it can win you games, and in some cases. But sure. -8, okay, on the season, and again, there's only like 10, 12 teams that were below you in the country. As far as that goes, I mean, -8. So if you were just -5, maybe it alters a game or two, and maybe we're talking about a 9-win season just like that. So that just goes to show you how close it can be, and how still good you were despite your own inadequacies from that number. But
man, does that even count the onside kick going the other, or I mean, think about other. No,
these well, exactly. It doesn't factor that kind of thing in. This huge, is just exactly. I mean, this is strictly just interceptions and fumbles, given away or taken, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, there's some of that too. The other thing is we were talking about portal and in your quarterback room and all these different things. We are on the cusp here. Tomorrow morning, TCU and Kansas State will tee it up, and they will do so playing for the conference championship. One of those teams has a chance to play in the playoff, no matter if they win or lose that game. And I think it's fascinating that both of those programs will take the field playing for conference championship with essentially backup quarterbacks. Okay. I mean, the Chandler Morris to Max Duggan story, well documented, but Will Howard has basically gotten that job from Adrian Martinez, has not given it back. They like the vertical passing game. It just shows you that the sport is different and that position is different. And really, I don't know if it ever will go back to, hey, we had one guy, he played all 12 games, he was phenomenal. That is just so unrealistic in this day and age.
Really, That's not where I thought you were going with saying that it's different. I thought you were going to just talk more so about the skill set that a team lacks here or there. But has it become more difficult just to keep a guy healthy?
I think because everybody runs them. I think everybody runs them. And
because this is the most protected era ever for quarterbacks also, by the way.
It really is interesting. Absolutely. But, I think that you're putting, quarterbacks in harm's way more now than ever before because it's such a pain for the defense to defend. It just is.
Chris, why is that? We've known that forever. I mean, I don't even know how far you want to go. It doesn't pass in the NFL, but an elusive dual threat quarterback in college can cover for a multitude of sins. Why do you think, maybe it seems just to me only more recently you've seen that shift in more locations, I guess, or
because I think defensive schemes have changed and it was like keep everything in front. And so that's the one thing that can punish those kinds of schemes is like, cause you can't defend it. I mean, you can spy, you can do some different things, but it's just the one, guy on offense you can't account for when he starts to run because there's too many gaps at that point. If you're looking at it from that standpoint, my point though of bringing it up is you have like Hudson Card leaves Texas, and he enters the portal. Now that they've got a Arch Manning coming in, and you've got Quinn Ewers and all that. But Kyron Drones enters the portal. He was Baylor's, Blake Shapen's backup, really good player. And so that's why if you can figure out a way to keep two of the three of your guys, boy, you really have to feel good about things because I bring all that up to say whoever the two are, they're more than likely going to play next year and maybe play a lot and not by design, by necessity, whether it's ineffectiveness or injury or let's get this other guy on the field. I think it's just fascinating that you've got a situation for playing for the Big 12 championship where these guys were backup quarterbacks. And it proves that you can have more than one really good one. The old saying about, man, if you don't have, really a one quarterback and you've got some others, it means you don't have any. I don't believe that anymore. This proves it. This proves that is not the case.
But how do we gauge Max Duggan in this conversation? Because to me, Max Duggan, I mean, I kind of thought coming into the year, like, I don't know why they're toying with anybody else, and maybe it's just accolades or decoration or whatever. But do you really think, was Max Duggan, he's the Johnny Unitas Arm of the Golden Arm Guy of the Year? I think that's the name of the award, right?
And may win the Golden Arm Award or whatever. But he may in fact win the Heisman. I mean, it's probably going to be him or Caleb Williams. I don't really know who else.
I'm interested to hear you say that, man. That you're off of the belief about just having one versus having multiple. That's interesting.
I just think not that it's not good to have one that's better than the other. I'm just my point is it almost takes away from the other guys because everybody's got more than one dude that can really play and play well, and we're having to see that. That's just that's what the Big 12 specifically. I mean, because we're so focused on this league, that's just what we see. And it's if you give a guy a chance, he gets a little experience. I mean, guess what? So. It's just kind of, but as we look at the portal and you look at your own room and you look at kind of what else is happening around the league, it makes you realize how important keeping guys here would be. That's really, to put a bow on that part, that's really what I think it's just fascinating because I mean, Will Howard, he didn't give that job back, man. And they, I think Adrian Martinez is healthy and they could have, but they like the vertical part of what he does. He's not as good of a runner as Martinez, but he can still run. And I just think, I mean, he's about to play for a conference championship, I mean, to his credit. And so, and granted, he had played quite a bit last year out of necessity. So he wasn't just some, guy. And again, Max Duggan had played plenty previously. Sure. As well, but just lost the job in August and then got his shot and never gave it back. So,
that is really interesting. And they're both wearing purple. What does that tell us? I'm going to go Brian Windhorse here about the color purple. That's for another episode, I guess.
My last stat or point to make is I did a little bit of research. There, I think I mentioned to you a couple of 3 weeks ago that Texas Tech was the only school in the Big 12 that didn't have a run of 50 yards or more. Okay.
Yep.
That still holds true. I dug a little deeper though. And you're almost a dead last in the country. You are one of 8 programs in the entire country. I mean, everybody that didn't have a run of more than basically 40 yards or more. Okay. Your longest run from scrimmage, I think this year was 38 yards. There's only 8 programs. I mean, and so let's see. Bowling Green, Colorado, James Madison, NC State, Northwestern, San Jose State, Utah State. Those are the others. That's it. And it's
company?
Exactly. It's crazy to think, because if you mix some of that in, some big play potential, it's just amazing how much easier play calling gets, and the margin for error gets, and maybe you avoid some of these turnovers that you had because you keep the drive alive, and that's maybe 2 plays later it's like, oh, we had a tipped pass and they picked it off and that drive's over with, instead of just taking it to the house, score points, game over. And so, it also speaks to how much faster they need to get on that side of the ball as well. Yeah. And this has been a problem around here for a while, because I've told you this. I think this is the most unimpressive group of outside receivers that you've had around here in a long time. When you just look at, I think Jerron Bradley's got it all in front of him. But and I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying, compared to what, Antoine Wesley and even like Geiger last year, and you just go back and look at the history of your wideouts and your skill, I just don't know if like J.J. Sparkman, Trey Cleveland, even Loic Fungi, if they really are ever gonna, if that light is gonna come on. But I'm talking receivers now. But even then, that position had an issue with just not being able to run away from people or have big plays. You'd have the big catch, and then I get tackled right here. So, but the rushing thing was just crazy to me, because that is hard data. That you don't have a Kendre Miller, Bijan Robinson, a Deuce Vaughn, on and on it goes. It just seems like everybody else kind of had a something along those lines where you make a mistake, I'm gone, and you're not catching me. You're going to look at the back of this jersey, running right into the end zone, and you just didn't really, as good as Taj and SaRodorick are, that's just not really their game.
Yeah.
So anyways, but just 8 other programs, or 7 others, I guess, in the country that you were the 8th that didn't have a run of 40 yards or longer all season.
Is there any, and I know transfer portal stuff is still yet to be revealed, but from a recruiting perspective, is there any speed on the horizon? Do you have any hope of improving that?
Yeah, I think one, you're going to get, I do think SaRodorick will, leave and not come back. And so you'll get a lot more Cameron Valdez if he's healthy.
Yeah.
I think Bryson Donnell is somebody they feel good about. But, there's been a lot of talk about Josh Fleeks, who left Baylor or in September, I think it was. There was some, he's a Cedar Hill guy. He runs about a 4.2, 4.3, and he's a senior, and he's got 1 year to play. And so I think that people have correctly connected the dots there on, could he finish up his career at Texas Tech? I do believe that answer is yes. And he's a slot / running back / offensive skill player of some sort, and that adds some speed. And then I'm kind of fast. Yeah,
I was just gonna say, I don't care where the speed comes from. It could be any of those positions, really, just to add a lightning bolt somewhere.
But just add some juice, man. Yeah. Absolutely, add some juice, and then I'll be just kind of interested to see kind of what else happens with the portal. If you lose anybody else, if you bring anybody in. I do think Caleb Smith was a commitment that decommitted recently. I think they liked him. He decommitted and took a visit to Notre Dame. I do think he's going to ultimately commit to Notre Dame. And I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing, because if you can go find me the version of like Kalen Geiger out there in the portal to come in and play a year or whatever, however you want to do it, whatever you can find, I'm all for that. I'm all for helping this group immediately.
Sure.
As opposed to a younger guy that, as good as Caleb Smith may be, I guess I'm looking more in the here and the now, and that's the way, it affords you to be able to do that, because at some point Texas Tech has a a scholarship room problem. There's not a lot of available options as far as space goes. And so I think, though, that when you get, somebody, hey, he's going to go to the portal or not come back or whatever, or you get a decommitment, that opens up something that I think you can kind of entertain a portal option. And it doesn't mean that just because you bring somebody in, they're going to work. I mean, we've got a variety of guys on defense that absolutely worked. In fact, I don't know if there's many of them over there that didn't work, actually. It's been shocking to see how good they were with portal guys on that side of the ball. Even guys like, Miles Cole and Vital Scott that played sparingly this year. I think those guys were welcomed additions. I mean, Miles Cole will be back next year. Scott is out. Obviously, he graduates. He only had 1 year left. But, point being, we talked about K. Briggs, Michael Shanahan. They just didn't help you. So there's no guarantee that if you bring a portal guy in, they're going to work. But anyway, But yeah, point is they are slower on that side of the ball. They know it. They want to fix it, and it just takes a bit because everybody wants the fast guys, right? I mean, so those are hard to find. So anyway, but those were some things that I looked up and thought that was worth pointing out.
That's really interesting because particularly those two that you mentioned, the turnover margin and big plays or lack thereof. Yeah. I mean, those are not recipes to get by in some tight situations.
And yet here you are. You won all these one-score games. Exactly. Nailed it.
I don't know what it speaks to other than intangibles, to be honest with you. Being a little hungrier, a little more resilient.
What does it look like if you still play this hard, you are this resilient, you don't turn it over as much, maybe you create a few more takeaways, and you're faster? That's really the whole point is – if you keep all these same things and yet you improve on a few of these others, boy, I think you really like where this thing's going.
Looks like we're playing a quarterfinal Rose Bowl game in a couple of years is what that looks like, Chris. I knew there was going to be a pick-me-up somewhere in here because you were really smacking me with some hard truths there for a while.
It's a credit to their grit and mindset and just not giving in and still figuring out ways to be really good, even though you weren't in some things. But all that matters is you won, and you won your last 3, you won 7 total and all that. But I just look at it as like, man, it's crazy to think you did win this many considering. And what if you kind of fix some of that stuff and you still are playing as hard and as gritty and all that stuff? That's where it gets really fun.
I mean, outside of the time that Weber State and Houston were on your November schedule, I can't think of many Novembers or any over the previous decade where you had as much fun as you did this time around and felt like you were playing some of your best football when the season was coming to an end. We talk about it every year, all year. You want to be a team that's getting better because well-coached teams do. Nobody stays the same from week to week. You're getting better. You're getting worse. And I think Texas Tech progressively, and then losing your best player, by the way, at the end of it all, got better as a team. So the grit is certainly there for Joey McGuire and company. We talked early on this year about how often Coach McGuire was mentioning, we shouldn't have even been in that game. And yet they were finding ways to be in those games. And thankfully down the stretch, you got over the hump in some of those tight situations, which, by the way, is another box to check, right, as far as rebuilding a program. I mean, we saw close games under Matt Wells, but you weren't getting over the hump and you weren't walking away with W's very often. You did that more often in year 1 under Joey McGuire. That's a great thing. And
I completely agree.
Speaks to the guts of a football program. So hopefully they'll take that with them wherever we are headed for game number 13. We've gone a little long here, Chris, but I had to ask you at the end of this anyway. Following what was a really interesting bowl conversation yesterday, is there anything to update our conversation from yesterday as we head into the weekend, or are we still thinking maybe Paul Wall Airbnb is going to be the option?
Well, I did wake up to a projection from The Athletic that indicated Tech in Arkansas and Houston and Florida State and Oklahoma and Orlando, and I thought, we maybe guessed right there.
Thanks for listening, Athletic Writers.
No. But I mean, I think that seems to be the way it's going, and I don't really know. I don't know what would change it.
Yeah, there's no games that are going to be played that would affect you in that way.
Nope.
Right.
And in fact, any of those 4 teams, if we just were talking about those 4, nothing changes this weekend at all, or can change. And so, I think what it tells you is, though, league representatives, bowl representatives, they're talking with one another. You're starting to put these pieces of the puzzle together and trying to maximize matchups. Those conversations aren't necessarily, I guess, just private. People can kind of read the tea leaves or are aware of what's going on, but maybe that's exactly what we get are the Hogs in Houston. And I'm here for it. Sign me up.
For sure. I really think after processing that more overnight, while I was attracted to it to begin with, because you're here in the great state, it is in very large part about, for me personally, having an opponent and an opponent's fan base that will be juiced for it. And I think Arkansas will. And
Absolutely.
I think that's what makes these games so enjoyable when you're in the range of just the majority of bowl games, like Texas Tech, once again, will be this season. So a little heat from the other sideline or the other set of grandstands ain't going to hurt anything in any way, shape, or form. Grandstands in 1945 are playing out at the Carnival. I don't know what I'm talking about there. That's a good point to wrap up the week, man. It's been an interesting one, to say the least, as we basked in the glow of a big win for Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders. We'll get some confirmation before we're back with you next on where we are bowling, and we will begin to process all of that. So catch up on any of the conversations you've missed so far this week on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts to get ready for that. Chris, enjoyed it as always, man. Thanks for the insight and the time this week.
The hope, it is alive, man. Keep it going.
So.
Yes, sir.
Very much so. And keep it going right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. After making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen each day, make Locked On Sports Today your next listen. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. That is Locked On Sports Today. He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Hope you have a terrific weekend. We'll catch you on the other side to begin making bowling plans. It's on the way on Locked On Texas Tech.